future. Yeah, so good evening,
Yeah.
Andrej. Um,
Good evening, my friends. Back in Africa.
yeah, yeah, that's cool, man. So we're here this evening to discuss your record flight in the Curio, but also maybe you can start with a bit of background about yourself, how you decided to come to Kenya, or how that whole thing came right after the exiles, right?
Yeah, there were multiple reasons why I came to Kenya, but it was not really planned. It was actually my very first trip to African continent, so to say, especially for flying, as far as I remember. And yeah, I was prepared to actually go to Colombia and eventually fly through Venezuela and stay a bit in Venezuela and Colombia like I did last year. And the escalation in Venezuela was just about happening. And the flights then, just about the time when I was about to book, were canceled. So I knew that I'm not going in this direction. And so I was thinking about Kenya for some time, knowing that it's a place where you can basically plan a trip around January, February, those months that I kind of like to do some kind of flying training. And so I was eyeing Kenya, knowing it's a very stable place with a stable weather pattern, and that's basically what you want to have when you do a trip for, even if it's going to be for 3, 4, 5 weeks, which was my case. You kind of want to have a place with a stable weather pattern, and at the same time, I'm still in the cycle of training for the Red Bull itself. So I knew I wasn't sure about like hike and fly particularly, and it ended up to be not that much of a hike and fly trip at all. I barely hike, and that few moments that I did hike, I realized that that's not a place to do a hike and fly trip, be it for maybe some snakes and animals and whatever dangers, as well as a bit of a lack of hiking routes or just the maps lacking the routes, because there's a lot of routes and people walk a lot in the nature there, but it's easy to get on a hiking path and basically end up going nowhere and having to come back. And it was a case that I experienced when I did some hiking. So, but anyway, so the fact was that I was still looking for a place where I can get some flying hours at this time of the year, and eventually also being in a new place. So I think the key of getting flying experience, the key of becoming a really good pilot is to throw yourselves into new places, um, new situations. And I think Kenya was in the very end the perfect place for this training for me. Now judging it, yeah, after my experience, I didn't know what's gonna come, but I was basically thrown into a landscape which, yeah, I mean, on the track logs, it always seems very, very simple and easy. You just fly along the ridge and you do a lot of kilometers and you do them fast. I think a lot of high-end pilots are not even thinking about Kenya because they think, oh yeah, it's some easy flying along the ridge, and just for people who want to get like a lot of kilometers fast without having that much skill. But in the very end, it's much more technical than it looks from the track logs, and it's much more varying than it looks from the track logs. Obviously, the first leg going south and back is ridge soaring, and it is, after doing 10 flights, getting a bit boring because it's same like the first 3, 4, 5 flights. I was really enjoying even this part because there's a lot to see and there's a lot of like little huts and people and children, and it's pretty fun, it's cool. But yeah, on the long run, after like 2 weeks, you're just knowing that you need to pass this section, to actually, after these 2-3 hours, to get into the real, more like technical flying, flying fast and flying in a more of a complex terrain. And yeah, indeed, flying 250, 260 kilometers on the site is not as challenging because it can be done pretty fast, and there's not a lot of kind of places where you need to do like very strategical decisions. And even if you fly slowly, you can use basically the whole day to, get this 250, 240, 230, 260 flight done. But the hard part comes when you need to extend past 260 mark, which is basically you need to cross uh, uh, to the outer mountains, and coming back is always a challenge. So it's time taking, and on the way back, just to summarize why I think it's an interesting varied terrain, is on the way back you sometimes have to go into the flatlands, and so yeah, it's not like ridge soaring as it might look on the track logs. It is indeed a very varied terrain. So I really like it because it's not like one-sided flying. You have all these things. Sometimes on some training flights, when I wasn't really going for the distance, I think even a couple of flights I just took off a bit later and I went straight north without doing the first leg, because I already knew what that leg is about. And I just, in the first 2 weeks, I was more kind of exploring and understanding how to fly some sections really fast. So, yeah, I'll come to that a bit later. But in general, yeah, the idea was to have a really good playground for flying and for learning how to fly, or like enhancing my skills. One has to think that skills are accumulated, and one gets better and better when you fly a lot. And even when you start from zero, you just always get skills step by step. But there isn't ever a moment that you're like able to say, okay, now I have all the skills. So obviously I feel that from various aspects, I have a pretty full skill set in the sense of, managing the glider, thanks to the extended acro training I did and even competing in the acro scene. Doing quite a lot of ground handling that I still recommend to all pilots from 0 to 100. Skill set is always to do as many hours grounding as possible, at least 50 hours a day. Oh, not a day, 50 hours a year. And so, yeah, so that is also an important skill, to spend a couple of weeks a year, or at least a couple of months in the whole progressing stage on the dune or in some place where you can do a lot of ground handling. So even so that the skill set is pretty complete, there is always a chance to progress further and to keep also training the skills that you already have. And so, yeah, for the X-Alps, it's indeed about flying. It's obviously super important to be physically fit, but if you do a simple mistake in one competition day, that can cost you around 10 to 15 kilometers of distance, straight line distance, which doesn't sound much, like imagine these flights we do in Kenya, it's 300K flights. So what is 10, 15 kilometers? Like nothing. But in terms of XL, 15 kilometers straight line is around 25, 30 kilometers sometimes in walking, even if it was 20. So 20 kilometers of walking is basically 3 hours, so that's quite a lot, that's like, you do, and that's like one single mistake. So doing just one mistake, that can happen, to any pilot of any level. Doing 2-3 mistakes a day can happen to any pilot. Doing even more than 3 mistakes can happen to any pilot. So yeah, like it can sum up, and you can end up, instead of flying 150K on a day in the X-Alps, you can end up flying 120. And these 30K through these 3 mistakes is basically like 50K on the road. That's a full, at least like half a day, or let's say almost a day of like walking. So yeah, nobody has ever won the race by walking, and nobody will ever do. Tommy Kokonela tried, and he was not so far in one edition, but it was like pouring and it was raining nonstop almost like a week long. So that was maybe an extreme case, but still he was conquered. So that's why I do stress and I do put like maximum focus on flying skills and refining and fine tuning. And so Kenya was indeed the place, and it was chosen to be one of those places throughout the year to put together the hours and the flying skills, and like I said, to fly in a new place and get challenged by how to conquer the place and fly it efficiently. And these are all skills that you need to have for the XL10 in the very end. And also, don't forget just a simple matter of flying hours. So that's how pilot experience is being measured in the very end. Like if you want to know how a pilot is experienced, you ask him simply how many hours he has accumulated in his flying career. And then you might eventually ask throughout how many years he has managed to achieve these hours. Because if somebody tells you, I flew like 1,000 hours already, it's like that, quite a lot of hours, that's good, But if he's going to tell you he's flying 30 years, well, then, 1,000 hours in 30 years is not so cool. Flying 1,000 hours in 2 years, I might like see a pilot having better skills being just a very fresh pilot flying 2 years plus, let's say, some training stage, but flying 1,000 hours in 2.5 years. There I would say like this pilot is going to be much, I would bet on him that he's not going to have an accident. Whereas a pilot having 1,000 hours through 30 years of flying, well, he might be more reserved. He might be taking less risks. He might be kind of skilled in the weather. So there's some pros and cons, but eventually maybe his decision making in the air or his responses in extreme situation in turbulence collapse might be more limited than a young gun that has 1,000 hours under his belt, like within a short period of time. So yeah, so Kenya is basically the place to get these hours. You want it or not, you think it's boring or not, it's the place to really go to in this time of the year, be it January, February. I think there are very few places after this experience I had that do allow this amount of training. And basically we had maybe one of the best seasons in the history. But then again, I think the record of the last decade shows that the consistency was anyways pretty high, usually. Maybe there haven't been always years which allowed so long flights consistently. But I think probably like 20 days from a month, you can fly there every day from, in these high times, January, February. So yeah. So that's kind of like my summary. And you asked me, maybe I'll just say a couple of more words about me. So basically I started flying something around 2022. No, 2012, sorry. I don't remember that. So 2012, so it's around 15, 17 years, something like this. I'm now around 7,000 hours plus minus. And like a big part, probably half of these hours are connected with acrobatic training because that was my main discipline. So I basically trained around 500 to 700 hours a year when I was in my prime time competing. I was around the year 2016, 17, 2015 probably, and 16 were the strongest years. And so now I'm basically switching. I've done this switch already a couple of years back. I stopped competing in the acro scene around 2018, and I definitely always loved hike and fly. So it was always one of my beloved disciplines, and I supported Aaron Durugadi for the Italian team in the Red Bull Clubs 2013, 15, and 2017. So I did love the discipline. I just focused on acro those years. And now in the last years, I'm coming obviously much more in contact with with distance flying and much less with acro. I still fly around 50 to 100 hours of acro a year, plus minus, and probably around 100, 150 hours of tandem flying in my company, and then around 5 to 700 hours of cross country. That's kind of my seasonal setup. And yeah, that's kind of also the general experience with flying. And so, yeah, I'm open to all your questions you're gonna have, and let's get started.
Yeah, I have a quick question. In those 7,000 hours you've done, or let's say cross country might have been less. Maybe you've done 5,000 hours cross country or something.
Well, I think like 3,000 probably.
3,000,
Yeah, three to
3,000.
five, 3 to 4. Yeah.
When did you, how did, I find it very difficult as an intermediate pilot. You flew, on this record, you flew 340 kilometers and you spent 9 hours and 40 minutes in the harness. Is there a moment in the when you're flying that you get tired, or how did you how do you how long does it take to get that stamina to stay that long in the harness? Because personally, after 2.5 hours, I'm usually just saying, "Listen, I'm getting tired of this. I'm just gonna go land." Or is it just because you're pushing the number? You have the goal to get to the record.
I think there's a mix of things, and I think that being asked a similar question from all kinds of pilot levels, I think it's also not for everybody. So important is that you enjoy that what you do. So I think every pilot has to understand and feel, like it's like in life, you have to feel what do you want to have from life, and aim for it. You might, not be even a pilot, and you might, think about, like, what do I want to do in life? What do I, and you see somebody flying and you're like, okay, I want to try this sport, so you start flying, and then maybe you feel, oh, maybe this sport is not for me. I feel kind of, scared. I have to overcome all these fears. I go to the takeoff, and every time before I take off, I have to go to the toilet. Like you have this belly feeling. So yeah, I mean, your body is just telling you the sport is not for you. And I mean, as beautiful as the sport is, well, if you really like to fly, then maybe you just, and you want to, you like to travel as well, maybe it just makes sense to basically, when you go to new places, instead of carrying 10, 20 kilos of kit, you just, go and check for some tandem business, and you fly around with a tandem company with a pilot who knows the place, and you just enjoy the views. It's like, this is an extreme example. What I'm just trying to say is that, or the key thing is to kind of feel what is good for you. And so some people are extremely stressed, and maybe, they're just getting gray hair by trying to be a pilot and follow a dream that they thought it's their dream, but it was somebody else's dream, right? And then maybe you're super easy with doing sunrise and sunset flights, and you're enjoying like easy glide and some little soaring sessions, like perfect. Like that's the sign, that's what you want to be doing, and that's what you want to be chasing. And you might want to connect with some travels and do these kinds of flights all around the world in some super easy places. And that's also one segment where one can proliferate. And some people just love to hike a mountain and not have to hike it down and just fly it down. And they do it also mornings and evenings, and they might have wonderful hike and fly, events. So these are, let's say, mountaineers that are connecting their love for the mountains with the sport. And so when you ask about these hours, so for me, I am not, suffering. I'm flying, and like 9 hours is not a long flight. I had some 10.5 hour flights. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really a person that is chasing numbers, but I don't think I have had an 11-hour flight. Maybe I did now in Bruce. I don't remember exactly. I was landing like very late. Maybe I might have been close to the 11-hour mark, but yeah, I think 11 hours, 11 and 50 minutes is kind of like close to the
Okay.
maximum that you get to achieve on like the best. You need a very, very good day. You need to take off like 9 or 8:30 in the morning in the Alps, and you need to be landing like around 8 in the evening. And that's now the season starting like May, June in the Alps. you can take off around 8:45 and land 8:45 minutes. So you might practice 12-hour flying window. So 11 hours is kind of like high side, but yeah, be it 9 and 11, these are long flights, but I don't, of course, if I fly last season, I did in the Swiss Alps, I did like 5 days in a row. Each day I did 10 hours. So I did like 50 hours in like 5 days. So then it does feel like exhausting. I have to admit, it's like I'm a human being, so like waking up, at 4:30 in the morning, and I did them with hike and fly. So imagine I like woke up 4:30 in the morning. I prepared like breakfast. I cooked for lunch and for dinner. I cooked 3 meals. I packed it in a bag. I set off 5:30. I went. Actually, I took the bus to get under the mountain, not to spend time on the flats, and then I hiked like 1100 verticals to take off, just to take off like at 9:30 in the morning and fly 10 hours and 10, 20, whatever, 10 hours, land, and basically go home and go to bed and just wake up and the same thing 5 days in a row, like with this setup with 4,000 vertical and 50 hours flying. So yeah, I felt my body is like coming towards the upper limit of what like maybe pleasure is, like you kind of like still wanting to fly on the day 6 and that was not a good day, but you're feeling like you might have like enjoy the rest day or rest weekend. So I don't suffer doing these long flights, and indeed, the more you fly, the easier you manage it. I remember my very first like 6, 8 hour flights 10, 12 years back. I kind of was floating in bed. I went to sleep and I felt like, being on a boat, like from all these ups and downs that you feel through the, climbs in the harness. I just had this like feeling in my body. My body was kind of floating in bed. So I kind of vividly remember this moment after the very first very long flight. But you manage to, like with everything, like if you will be going to the factory every day to work like 12-hour shifts, like hardcore, you will, get used to it. And some people are working like that. Some people are working like 14, 16-hour shifts, and they're like living a hard life, and living in slums and having barely any food to eat. So like what we're doing is still far from the most extreme thing in the world. But yeah, it takes some time to get used to it. It can definitely be like something manageable. I'm definitely not the only pilot flying long flights and flying like hundreds of hours. Like so the real question is like, is it that what one wants to pursue? And if one feels good at pursuing it, and if one enjoys being in the sky, I enjoy more being in the sky than being on the ground, honestly. So, the problems are different out there. So yeah, so I really enjoy like flight time, and obviously the good gear is good to have. Like if you have a comfy harness, that's an important aspect. You wanna be comfy, and you wanna have food. I have like a lot of food. I am doing my nutritional setup very different than most of the pilots I see around me. Um, and so, like most pilots, they eat sweet stuff and energy gels and all these kind of like nutritional tools that are being more used by runners and trail runners. But you're not a trail runner while flying. So I don't want to be overdosing myself with sugar. I don't, I'm doing this I love doing it, but I want to be doing it in a way that is sane for my body. So I think that it's really important to, eat like properly, but also, not go like on high sugar stuff. And, I fly, like when I was in Kenya, I flew like, I don't know how many days nonstop. I cut some days short, obviously, but, like when you fly 100 hours in a month, you're basically flying 1/3 of your life, or maybe more. I did the calculation, I don't remember exactly, but you're spending most of your time of your day in the sky. It's still like maybe like you're flying more time than you're sleeping. And you're basically, you don't want to sacrifice your health for that. So like I said, I don't want to become a pre-diabetic just because I love paragliding and I love to fly like 10 hours a day. I want to have like a well-balanced nutrition and be able to eat it. So obviously, if it's a turbulent day, it's not as easy to eat. Sometimes I have to postpone. my eating because it's not the right moment. Sometimes when I eat, because of this turbulence, there is a giant mess all around me. So I'm used to making my equipment dirty because of the food flying all around. So yeah, but I still, you know, take like food that I, like see as proper and good for my health, and I will not, eat just like some chocolate or chocolate bars or some energy gel just because they're easier to eat and make it a bit more convenient. So yeah.
So you're eating the Kilima Resort eggs. You took a lot of the boiled eggs with you.
Yeah, I do eat eggs as well. But it's not like the only thing, like eggs is a really, I mean, for you to be able to eat eggs easily, they need to be shelled already, right? So that makes sense.
Hmm.
Simple, as, you just have shelled eggs in a plastic bag and you can pretty easily eat eggs. I do sometimes end up having them not shelled. So I did already a couple times like eggs um, in the harness and having to, eat them like a kiwi. I just crack them in half and I eat them with a spoon. So yeah, it sometimes it depends how much time you've got for the preparation. But like eating just eggs is not the only thing I do. I usually just prepare a full menu, like I have some vegetables cooked with maybe some lentils and eggs and meat, like
Wow.
ground beef maybe. And yeah, so I have like yeah, full menu. And like in Brazil, I kind of ended up having my dinner as well, like on these 10-hour plus flights. I usually in Brazil I eat breakfast at 5 in the morning or 5:30, really early. So I'm getting hungry 11ish, 12ish. So I'm eating lunch around 11, 12, and I'm eating dinner on my final glide sometimes, like at 5:30. So I land and I'm already over with my dinner. So yeah, that's kind of like the logistics behind.
Well, so I don't want to get into detail because we want to talk about your record player, but you take like I imagine you take a bag for lunch and a bag for dinner, or just a bag and you just put your hands, like you take it out during flight, you just eat it with your hands. You don't use
Yeah,
a fork and
actually,
knife. And
no, I do with a spoon, but a spoon is a good tool for that. But I actually store my stuff in a glass. So yeah, this is a small glass, but you can imagine like a glass like this, but taller, you know. So you basically, I have it in my harness in one of those front pockets, and as it's really tall, it's like 20 centimeters tall, kind of like a 1 liter glass. So basically it can be sitting there like as if it was on the table, and I can just with one hand I can basically eat from the glass. Sometimes obviously if I am flying on the speed bar, it's a bit tricky because with the higher speeds, things can fly off the spoon. That does happen. But if I'm thermaling, so usually I eat when I thermal. So when I'm thermaling, then of course the thermal performance is degraded, I have to admit. And but everything is degraded. Anytime you start to do anything else apart from flying, that's why many pilots don't eat at all. I know pilots that they don't eat 10 hours. They're just like so super focused. But the concentration level will drop. You want it or not, you need to basically fuel your body and your brain. So uh, obviously, during the time that you eat, be it on glide, be it on during thermaling, you're losing performance. So in thermaling, you're losing performance because you might lose the core. When you're on glide and you eat, then you lose performance because you're not tracking the line, and the line is changing everything. So basically, when you fly and you want to really do really, really well, and you want to do really fast flying and efficiently, then on the line, you're constantly checking the clouds that are forming in front of you, checking the terrain, checking many details, checking eventually birds or eventually people flying around you, and you're constantly tweaking your line. And that makes a giant difference in the efficiency. So when you're then eating or peeing or whatever, doing anything or playing with your instrument, checking weather forecast, doing the flying or communicating with somebody, then obviously you're degrading these capabilities that you have on the glide. So yeah, but I do like to, like eat in the thermal when possible, because then you are having a little bit lower speed and things don't fly off the spoon. So basically, you're just sticking the spoon into the glass, putting it in your mouth, and putting the spoon back in the glass, and then you can continue to be on the break. So, I mean, eating is, to put the food in the mouth is one part of the eating. The second part is chewing it up, and I enjoy eating slowly in the air because I have more time to chew in eventually, and kind of like also training this, because it's like any part of flying, be it takeoff, landing, be it ground handling, you can train it. So when you train how to pee from the harness, when you train how to eat during flying, you're basically constantly developing some new techniques, and you're constantly enabling yourself to get used to processing more stuff. So when you're really very well familiar with your glider, you don't need to care about collapses, about turbulence. It gives you a chance to concentrate on the line, on the formation of the clouds that are forming in front of you. So sometimes your performance enhances, and how you manage to become like more natural in flying is just thanks to the fact that you are able to concentrate on more things at the same time. At the very beginning, you're like maybe to concentrate on the air and on all this parasitic movement that you feel in the glide. And once you get over that, you can really like focus. Like I said, you see the clouds. And once you know that, these cycles of cloud forming and deforming are the key for the line and for the efficiency, you need to be constantly focused on that. You need to be constantly aware every couple of minutes to see, okay, what is happening with that cloud far, far, far in front where you're heading? Is this line of clouds finishing? Is it starting? So you can process that when you are, thinking about other stuff like this.
Okay. Any questions?
From my side?
Andrej, hi, it's Paris here. Thank you very much.
Hi there.
Good to see you again. And thank you very much for taking the time to be available to do this talk. I was wondering whether you could just talk us through, your big epic flight. I joined a little bit late, but I'm assuming that that you haven't covered that yet, and then maybe you could just talk us through that and the processes and your thinking
Sure.
as you went through that.
Yeah, for sure. That's gonna be anyways the main topic. I'll just say to this part that, and I mentioned it in the very beginning shortly, that the idea was to get to know the terrain. So I wasn't actually aiming for doing this particular flight. Even if I had a chance, maybe once or twice, I just turned back, and I knew I'm gonna maybe miss a really good day and a good opportunity, but I knew that I still don't have like all the puzzle pieces together. So maybe it would have been a successful 300, whatever. But I knew that if then I have more puzzle pieces together, I can basically get to that particular point up north at a much earlier time. And if then I get a good day as that day was, because for example, one of those days I just took off too late, right? So I knew that I'm already like 3/4 of an hour late. So yeah, I mean, just putting all these puzzle pieces together was one big part. And yeah, sometimes I did quite a few longer flights, and I felt like I want to rest. So I also a couple of times like went for a big flight, but then eventually throughout the morning session, it was clear that that was not the day, because the first part was a bit too slow and I needed to rest. So I basically landed at 10:30 after coming back to E10. And so I took a couple of rest days strategically like this, just flying the morning and doing like 2-3 hours, and judging that it's not necessary to go for the final attempt. And so, as you might remember, I also did a couple of flights which were which were like the longest at that particular moment. But then obviously the record was being beaten the other day or even the same day by a guy who took a bit more risk and flew a little bit, came to the turning point in the north after me and turned the turning point a little bit further than me because he could have seen obviously till where I fly, so he could decide where he's going to make a turn point. I was setting it and then he just did maybe a kilometer more or whatever. But being there 30 minutes after me or 1 hour after me obviously limited his chances to come back, but with some luck he managed to come back. So yeah, so some of these records they were overcome even at the during the same day, and some other days I think one when I flew like 300 whatever was 29, it was also being beaten the day after probably by another flight. So yeah, the longest flights was becoming longer and longer, so to say. So, and each one of those, I'm going to put up a screen here. So each one of those was kind of similar, but a little bit different because the weather has been a little bit different. So, I mean, the beginnings of these flights are kind of same, right? So you're flying this part to the north, and yeah, the weather can be very different in this early stage. So I think it's kind of like 50-50. Some days you're getting headwind in this first section, and some days you're kind of getting a little bit tailwind. So you're kind of much faster to get to the southernmost point towards Nayaru. And then the way back is a little bit longer. But what I can say is that I think for the very long flights, it is much, much better to actually have a little bit of headwind and have to fight towards the south, even though it's very unpleasant and there's a couple of points in this area that I'm now zooming in, where you kind of have to pass some lee side points because the wind is obviously flowing from kind of like, there's a component of east wind obviously, but it's kind of like southeast, so you've got like lee sides in some of these areas, and these can be a little bit nasty and ugly, but still it is really much better for the flight to have this this wind having headwinds, so to say, in the first section. Why? Because then when you come back, there is one pretty key area at the very beginning, which takes, so it's all about time optimization. So what you want to do is basically, once you get back here, and so guys, just tell me if it's loading the map. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it possible to follow? Okay.
Yeah, you can see
So
we can see it. Yeah, we can see it. It's
wonderful.
good.
So I'm gonna play it here, and it's gonna be a little bit easier. So once we're coming back and we're getting past, let's say E10, that's gonna be somewhere in this area. Okay, so now it's playing live. So there's one moment where we have to kind of go away from the ridge, and that's pretty much in this area. So I will zoom in a little bit. So what is happening here is that when you've got at the beginning a little bit of tailwind, so you've got a little bit of a northern situation. If this northern situation is already in the morning present, it's very usual that the northern situation will be also present around 10 o'clock at this area. And like you all know, the whole Kerio Valley system is basically northern flow in the afternoon. That's why the way back is sometimes kind of easier because it's the wind is pushing you back down towards E10. So, but what it also means that around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, when you're kind of passing E10 going back north, in this area where I am now zooming in, you're already feeling this northern flow much more stronger. So it's intensifying more and more and more. So around 10 o'clock at this time, you're fighting much more headwind and it slows down the flight. So basically in this area, going up to Cap Soar, you're then having a lot more headwind. And so what it also usually means that you will have more north wind up here in this area going towards Tot. So more north wind here is complicated because basically around the Chesagon area and the Sigor area, it's flowing around these mountains. And would be good if I could make some paintings. Let me see if I can make a little screenshot and draw something for you here. Well, I'll draw it like this. So yeah, obviously, if we're talking about the wind, the very best would be if there is at the very beginning no wind or even slight kind of north wind pushing you down to the south, but then this wind would switch magically and be vice versa. That would obviously be the golden situation, but we're not living in this setup often, and so we have to also be open to the fact that very often we will have to not have the perfect conditions. So I'll share another screen here that I'm loading, where I'm going to draw a little bit better, and I'll try to draw. Let's see. Okay, it's loading. Also, basically to make you understand what the wind is doing, and some of this will be very simple because you already have some information and you have some ideas. So let me see. Now I'm going to share the screen, and let's put it. Okay, entire screen. Let's do like this. So can you see the map now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good. So yeah, this is, I'm going to use some painting tools here. So now here at the beginning, so we're flying to the north. So in this area, that's where the air is basically wrapping around these mountains. So if we've got this north, so we will always have flow down this valley. That's kind of the typical afternoon valley wind. Why? Because in this area, the valley is having lower altitude, and as we go down south past Iten, the valley floor is rising. So through the pressure difference of the valley floor, we have this flow of air naturally always going to be happening, right? Why? Because you probably know, well, I'm going to say it for those in the future that don't know it, lower area, like lower altitude, higher pressure, higher area, lower pressure, and the pressure will always flow from higher pressure to the lower pressure. So this is always going to make this flow of air. But what's also playing a role, and that is that here, where I'm going to draw this green X, you will have also, as you can see, higher altitude than in the valley. So that's why you will always have this flow of air in this area as well, and then you will have this valley sucking air as well. So the key point where the strongest and most potent area is going to be, or where the most air is going to be accelerated, is in this area. So here is going to be the strongest most accelerated point, and it's really a very extreme case on the whole path. And generally, you will have this giant area. It's going to be taking a lot of air, and these mountains here are pretty low comparing to these mountains down here. So obviously, you will have the air flowing down here. Then obviously you will have all these mountains, they will be sucking up air as well. So because they suck like this, the whole direction of the wind will be kind of sidewards, kind of like this with the double arrow drawing. There's going to be the general flow of air lower in the valley, more direct down to the south, more on the mountain, sucking towards the big mountain. Then you will obviously have air coming in like this, but, and I will remove this arrow shortly, just to show you what happens in the afternoon in this area, just that we talk about it. This area has sun in the morning, but in the afternoon, you will have sun just on this area of the valley. So what it means, and I will draw it maybe with a little bit of a color, with a blue color. What it means is that sometimes, and this is the hard part, sometimes this area here creates a lot of cold air. There is a lot of shadow in these valleys, and this cold air is flowing down the valleys. You will see it on some track logs when the pilots are kind of thermaling like this away towards Chesta, if they are low, and then eventually when they hit higher altitude, they start to then thermal with the wind like this. Yeah? So it's something to also take into account that a lot of these cold air pockets, which might be forming in some of the shaded valleys, might influence the flow of air in some areas. I'm going to go back to what I wanted to show you with the red color. So now we were talking about how the air is flowing. So the air will be flowing inside these valleys and inside here. And as these mountains are kind of flat, like I mentioned, there's going to be a giant amount of air from this area trying to move towards here. And then this is obviously creating an effect where when we are then jumping back and flying back from Orwa, flying back in this direction when we are flying, so we will have a lot of headwind to cross. So this is the area till which it is from which it is very hard to come back, because we are flying into this direction. Maybe I will use a different color for the flying. I will put some black maybe. So we're kind of coming from here. This is still a bit of an easier path, apart from this area, which is very, very strong, very complicated, and very important to take care, because it will be sucking you into this direction, like we were talking about. So when we are kind of flying this path, we need to obviously jump towards here, and we're going to be fighting the headwind. So the stronger the north winds in the morning, which are kind of helping it go to the south, the higher the chance that the north wind in general is going to be very, very strong in this area in the afternoon. And yeah, high instability, which is very good for the good flying days, also creates stronger elements of this dynamics of the air flowing from here to here, here to here, and here to there. So it's something to always take into account. And that's why the point here is the crucial point. And we were mentioning the area of 260K. That's kind of here. So flying around to Toth and then coming in This is still like, I don't want to say beginner stuff, but it's very easy. And then you can turn this turn point even far in front if you want, as long as you can always come back. I will now switch to this screen. So we will put it full screen here. So as long as you can come back. Sure. Oh. So yeah, this is kind of like the key zone. So when you are here in front, you can extend a little bit, and once you come back, and you know you can come back somewhere in this area, you will always have the wind pushing, and it's helpful to get up. But the problem obviously starts once you need to cross, because here you will have the wind coming this direction, wrapping around this whole ridge. So you will have obviously also the sucking of the air coming inside this valley. So this valley is having a typical valley effect. It's obviously lower in this area, the altitude, and higher into the mountain. So this air will come in, plus you will have giant amounts of air coming here, wrapping over. So as you can see here, this mountain, here you will have sun. In this area, you will have sun. I will draw it maybe with the orange. So as you will have the sun in this area, it will be creating a thermal. And so the air has to come from somewhere. It's going to be coming probably from this area as well, from the cold area. So there's a lot of elements playing a role on this corner. This is the key corner on the whole flight. You know, like this is the thing what creates the flight and finishes the flight. It doesn't mean that the moment that you come back and you kind of miraculously, it's always a bit of a miracle to come here and finish somewhere in this area, make the thermal, or come all the way to here and make the thermal here, because obviously this area has a thermal potential. And once you make the altitude, you can fly in front, or you can fly down along the ridge. But this is definitely the key area on the whole flight. And like solving this area is the key. And it's also the most technical part of the flight. So when we're going to be looking at this particular flight, so we're going to...
Recording in progress.
Something happened? Something with the recording?
I can hear you.
I can
Something
hear
with the
you.
recording.
The recording is on.
Yeah,
It's all
cool.
good. I think it was somebody's microphone, maybe.
So I can switch back to the map. So yeah, on the way to the north, it's obviously not that hard, because you're usually coming in this area and you are kind of being pushed actually, and you have it. You already know that you're flying with the wind. That's normal. And in this area, when you're kind of approaching Sigor, before you decide to jump, so I guess you see the track lock evolving. So in this area, you kind of have to judge. Will you go for it? Will you jump to Sigor or not? Because you have to check your time. You have to feel how much drift you're getting. You have to know the forecast. Is it intensifying? How strong it is, etc. So here, this is This is the 340 flight. So I'm crossing to Sigor. And I don't know if this is the very longest one, but yeah, so I decided to cross to Sigor. And so here on the drift, I will do a little pause. So what you can already see, and this is like something really nice about looking at track logs. You know, like when you look at track logs, you can learn a lot of things. So something you can straight see and analyze is the wind drift on this thermal. So at some particular moment, as you see, I'm 2,950 meters high. So I'm not particularly high. I mean, sometimes you can be 3,500 in this area, but you see the wind drift is pretty strong, and sometimes you have to judge. If you see the wind drift is intensifying throughout the altitude, you don't actually even want to go so high. So at the very beginning on this drift line that you can see here on the orange line, I hope you're going to be seeing it properly. At the very beginning, you can see that there is already some drift, but maybe not as much. And then in the higher parts, I had a lot of drift. So maybe I might have seen that the thermal intensity is decreasing. So this is something really important to always calculate. If you're drifting 25 kilometers an hour, maybe you want to have at least a 3 meter per second thermal. Like if you're climbing 1 meter per second and you're drifting with 25K backwards, it's not, going to be doing you a lot of benefit. Actually, the contrary. And there was a day one pilot thermaled higher above me on the same thermal, but drifted so far behind that actually he lost at least 5 minutes. So I'm gonna do a little screen grab here just to do a little bit of drawing. I wish I could draw straight on the screen, but it somehow doesn't feel possible. So okay, so here we are. I'm gonna take the black color. So this is the drift we were talking about, right? So if I'm gonna continue to drift, let's say all the way here and earn 500 meters more, before I can push front headwind, I'm gonna lose all this altitude. It makes totally no sense to thermal. It's just waste of time, and eventually I might hit even stronger wind higher, and then I might have to actually decide to fly here, which is definitely not beneficial.
I have a
So
question. I have a small
yeah,
question.
sure.
This thermal where you were drifting, was there any moment where you just thought, I'm just going to fly straight? Because it looks like a lifting line, or was that a real thermal? Or
You mean like here where I'm flying, this part?
no, the thermal you were taking, you were turning.
This one. Yeah, here,
Yeah,
this one, right?
yeah, but you were drifting. So is there any moment where you just thought, oh, let me just not turn, but just fly straight? What made
Yeah,
you?
sure. I need altitude, right? Because here, this area is very strategical. This is first of all, it's a low point. So the mountains here are very low, something like 1,800 meters, if I remember properly. So what's happening here is you've got a giant venturi. So like, how to describe it in the best way? Like maybe here where I am now thermaling, there might be 25 kilometer per hour drift. But if I'm going to be thermaling in this area, and I did have some flights thermaling here and in this upper circle with the cross, here the drift was double almost. Yeah. So I had like almost 40K drift here, and I had 25K drift here. So sometimes, it just makes no sense to drift here, but very often like this area has a super potent thermal, so it can be here I would have to search for this flight, but I hit thermal in this area on one flight. It was a 8 meter thermal, and I just didn't thermal it because it made no sense. It was a 40K drift. I did maybe one or two circles, and then I flew straight in the 8 meter thermal, just flying in this direction, actually, just to kind of, this is not the right drawing. I kind of flew headwind against the thermal, just flying this 8 meter. And then the moment when it was ending, then I kind of flew out front, because you're choosing this line that you can see on this pink arrow, but you kind of need to drift into this area, or like head into this area, because you're constantly with 40k wind, you're like being pushed strongly inside. So like in this area, it just never really made sense to thermal. It's kind of better to get the altitude here if possible, where I was, as long as it like makes sense technically. Here I left the thermal at 3000 meters, or not even, just because it didn't make sense to thermal anymore. And I would have loved to start here with 3.5 or 4000 meters, because I know if I do so, I'm just going to get more far. So let's zoom out a little bit. And actually, I'm gonna move further a little bit, because it's gonna be a great example. So like this day, obviously you can see it was not as strong as some other days that I flew, but I flew quite a straight line. But some days I had to fly a little bit more like this direction, so to say, because the push was so big. And even on this line that you see here, the one that is on the track log, my heading with my glider might even be a little bit more to the right, but you just don't see it on the route itself. Why? Because it's like a boat. You might have your glider pointing in the direction of this purple of this pink arrow, but the real direction that you see on the GPS or on the track log is this, right? So it all depends on little details, but basically the idea was to fly really fast this day. So basically I took the altitude here, which I thought is sufficient and makes most technical sense, and then fly as fast and as direct as possible without thermaling as much. And you can see I didn't thermal all the way till I really hit a real thermal. And here I was getting really low. That's why you start to see me turn out like this in this area, because I was getting a little bit in trouble. I was getting lower and lower, and basically I was struggling a little bit. So I'll zoom in a little bit more here just to have an idea. Here you can see on the way I hit a little thermal, but as you can see, it didn't make sense to thermal it. So I just kind of like did a few turns, not really moving forward. And then basically here, that's the point where I knew that in this area, I kind of virtually have to get the altitude, right? Because I don't want to fly further wrong to the right. I want to go as straight to Mont Emtelo. So in this area, I tried to obviously vigorously search for a thermal. I couldn't just continue flying straight. Eventually, having the altitude up to the first thermal, I could have, but I decided, okay, I need to really, and you can see the drift is still heavy, right? You can see it on the drift of the line, that the drift is heavy. So I tried to basically get the right altitude to be able to enter inside the high mountains, because you need at least 3,500 to do that. And I think, let's have a look, 3,670, something like this. So that's where I kind of like knew that I need to spend time in this area where I was doing these two thermals that you see on the screen to be able to enter straight. And so I did so. And then basically flying in this area where I am now at, so that's a bit past Emtelo, this is starting to be a nice area to fly. Like once you are around 3,000 meters in this area, it's all pretty nice. This is a pretty nice area. And then obviously, because it's high mountain, it's having a nice shape here, like a kind of a V shape. I'm gonna make a little screenshot here. So always when you are flying, you want to read the terrain. So something that is very useful to use in any area when you enter a new area, especially. So here you see that this shape here is really nice. So well protected, you've got protection from both sides. So you know that this area will enable also thermals to form. Here I was going for thermal, obviously. And once you are coming into, let's say, a more exposed area, I might give a great example here, even though there is always a very powerful thermal on this one. And this one, I think I flew just once, so I cannot have a lot of judgment on this one. But this upper one, you can expect this to be a very complex area, broken thermals, not nice. Why? Because it's an exposed point. It's an exposed point. You will have air coming from these valleys in, like there's going to be air coming in like this. There's going to be some heating effects and elements. So you have to think that this area will not really let the thermals to form evenly. They're going to be very turbulent, broken, wind drifted, and not really as good, you know. So there might be better areas, maybe somewhere on this face. So if I'm going to have to come fly in here, I might kind of hope to get high here and not hope to, you know, go on some exposed areas that might be having really fractured thermals. So that's why kind of this area will provide you, and even this one here in front will provide you with nice thermals because it's protected. There could be, the thermals could be pushed in. And also thinking about the mountain triangle theory, there's some podcasts from Ferdinand about that. You will expect that this will create a nice thermal here and it's more protected. So yeah, this is kind of the easy part. Obviously, the more you fly in from there to the north, the less protected it will be. It's more flat and it's again not as optimal shape-wise. So obviously that's the direction where you have to fly if you want to fly far. So now on this day, 4,000 meters there, but I think that's pretty common. And here I was extending the flight and turning back. So here I'm going to note something that I did for my flying, and that is the turning back. I always had it set like on these past 3:30 flights, like 1 o'clock turning back, 1:15 very latest. I know that it was a very, let's say, safe decision. I could have had much higher risk tolerance or much lower risk tolerance. Higher risk? Yeah, no, much higher risk. Yeah, higher risk. Whatever. I could have taken much higher risk and just flown very easily another 10K forward and turning around maybe instead of 1 o'clock, 1:30. But it's always it's always about the judgment. Where will you know, like how far you go and if you have the time to come back. So on the way back, you know, it's very tricky to pass, and the way back is still very long. So turning around at 3 o'clock would have been beautiful, but the afternoons on the way back from Tot, they are not so easy. So it's something to take into account. And actually, those days which are very windy are the ones which are easier to come back from top down towards E10 because you can soar a bit better, but those are then extremely hard to cross from Sigor to Chesta. So yeah, it's always a gamble. And so I didn't push really on the risk level on these flights that I did. I flew very conservative time-wise. I flew very aggressive in terms of speed very often, like maximum efficiency, obviously, but time-wise, I was not really risking so much. So I was very conservative. So I'll pause it here a little bit because this is the track on the way back. If you want to check every little detail, you can play those backwards and study them in detail. It gives quite a lot of insight. As you can see on the way back, I've had a little bit of drift in my favor, kind of pushing me. The north wind was the wind drift change, you can see it here. This is a very nice spot to observe. So this is a typical thing. Actually, around 1 o'clock, the drift changes. So these two drifts that you can see here, you see kind of more of a pure east, maybe a slight element of south wind. But here on the way back, you can see there is already a considerable north component there. So here I had a very beautiful cloud street actually. So it was a bit unfortunate, and then I had to fly back towards the mountain because the line was more into the flats, as you can see. That's why I flew out towards the flats, away from the mountain, thermaled up. As you can still see here on this one, I was not above the ridge. So this is something that I will also now highlight here and talk a little bit about, because it will give you an idea about some strategies that you can make while flying. So first, like we were talking about, once you are having a strong drift, right? The stronger drift will be obviously from this ridge like that. The more you will be, let's say, on the front line, the less drift you will have. And it could be different drift, like here could be, this was showing or is showing clearly on the tracklog that the drift was like that. It might be that the drift would have been totally different on this line. It's hard to say from, like this, because we don't have a clear proof. But just by talking about these two lines, it's very important. If you see clouds, and here was obviously the cloud street, somewhere like this was the cloud street here. So let me do it differently. So here was the cloud street, and somewhere on this level. So I came out from the mountain on purpose, and it doesn't look like that on the tracklog because you feel like, okay, the mountain has the ridge line is here, but it doesn't feel I'm really far away from the mountain. But when you're really in flight and you fly so far out like I did here, it feels like going into the flats. So there was a clear line of cloud, which I am drawing here with the green line. So I try to catch the lift. When you see here, you see me kind of searching, flying kind of around, trying to find it. Then I hit the core and I'm kind of managing to get to cloud base. I think it was cloud base. And then I'm at the cloud and I'm kind of trying to catch another cloud. That's why I'm kind of flying here. So here I saw another cloud forming, and the whole idea was to basically, let me zoom out. So let's hope that this time I'm gonna get it full screen. Good. Okay, now we are back in the game. So when I finish terminal this one, I kind of try to catch another cloud here because the whole idea was to fly an outside line and not have to be on the mountain in this area. We already talked that this area is accelerating the air very strongly. So flying the outside line and eventually come here and emitting this place, right? So I try to catch the cloud there and okay, go back to this one. So that was the cloud that I missed here, obviously. And okay, what's going on here? Okay, maybe I'm back. Yeah, so I kind of lose a little bit time searching for it. I missed it. I clearly didn't catch it. So I have to go back to the mountain, which is what we're gonna see here. And I kind of fly and basically come down and let's see if I can still throw something and fly along and get a thermal here. So this was kind of like to make you understand that like not always it's simple to keep the line, but sometimes when you miss the cloud, you have no other option. So let's go back to the flight. So here we go. This is going to be the crossing, the key one. So this one didn't happen. Again, didn't happen really according to the plan. I'll go back a little bit again. I was at 3,500 here. I kind of thermaled a little bit and then continued this 3,100. And I'm starting the crossing just with 3,000. That's really not a good altitude. And so obviously there was a little thermal here. You can see the drift pushing me inside the valley. Another climb. This was a savior, really. And you're never like guaranteed to catch it. So I managed to fly 3.7. This was the ticket kind of back home. And if you don't get it, you might easily end up struggling or even finishing the flight there. So on this particular flight, I flew the outside line, if I remember properly. Okay, let me see, zoom out a little bit and draw some stuff for you here. Okay. So how is the technology working for you guys? Is it easy to see what I'm doing? I hope so.
Yes, working very well.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, very clear. Thanks.
So now we have this part. Let's dive in. So yeah, once again, here I got the saving grace thermal. Very typically, obviously, it's a lee side thermal. Why is it a lee side thermal? Because you have the heat on all this side of the mountain. So this is the thermal generator, but the wind is pushing from there, right? So these thermals, they might be starting even from here and drifting there. You know, there's various strategies. You can fly this whole thing differently, obviously. You can, I mean, I did once, I just had to do it differently. So I flew in here and went into the lee here. It was so heavy wind that there was no way to cross. So I knew that I need to get lee side thermal here and just battle it through. Like it's a little bit safer to fly outside, obviously. Here I was lucky, I got the ticket, I got this thermal, so I'm continuing. And here I kind of tried to catch a cloud, and you can see it here. I was kind of searching around a little bit, and I did a thermal there, so I did maintain my altitude. And then I basically flew with all the altitude a straight line to connect here. So on this particular flight, it was easy, kind of easy. I mean, nothing is always easy, but there's other days when it actually made more sense to fly even more open line. Sometimes you see a line of cloud like this green one, right? Or sometimes you see a line of cloud like this, right? So it all depends, and you have to always work with the sun, and the sun is obviously here, and the sun is very often here. That's why this area is particularly active. The sun is very often here. So sometimes flying the front route like this is the solution before you move in. And it is very often faster, right? So you have to remember, and we were talking about it already once, but I'll draw it again because it's very crucial to understand. You always in flying, you work with the sun, but also with the shade. So you have to realize that this area is extremely good in the morning, but is extremely bad eventually in the afternoon. And what it does is that this cold air will push down here sometimes like this, right? But at the same time, you've got the wind and the flats, so there's immense energy here. This energy is going in all these areas to the big mountains. It's going there where the sun is, right? I mean, if the sun is here, it's going to go there. The cold air will be pushing under it. It's going to be pushing these thermals, like we're talking. The drift can start towards the flats and then go back to the north. So it's something to really take care of, like when you fly, to understand where is the cold air and where is the shade, and work with the shade, and be careful not to fly just because somebody flew like that once, it was working. So very often, like in the morning, we can be flying more direct route like this. I saw one of the Polish pilots, they really like to fly much earlier and fly along this route in the morning, which logically is also working incredibly. It has all the sun from the morning here. It's a very, very compact ridge. You see it's here, the ridge is not so compact. So this ridge is not as compact, but down here at the very beginning, oh, something happened. Oh, so this part is not as compact anymore, but this part is very, very compact. So these things are some things, and steeper also, and higher and everything. So yeah, it does make sense in the morning to fly this route, but then when you're coming back, this route will not be working. And some pilots do try it, they're struggling and they lose time, and then they fly around here, and then they have to come in front, and then they get the thermals, in this area. So that's how they get stuck. It's a good 20-minute detour, and 20 minutes on this flight can be a success failure. So it's much easier to basically go and fly on the way back. So the blue arrow is the way back. The green arrow can be the way there, right? So it's much easier to fly the front line. Usually, judging by the clouds will be enough for you to judge the situation and create the correct line. So once you're basically coming here, this is the last kind of part of this transition to the front ridge, right? So this one can be also tricky, but it can be easy. There's days when it's just switching off around 3 o'clock. So at the moment where I am here in this area at 3,000 meters, it's 3 o'clock. And as you can see, I'm struggling, and I will struggle, and I'm getting low, and it seems that the day is over. So this is something that happens, and that's why, and that's 3 o'clock. So imagine that at 3 o'clock you're somewhere, and I saw some track logs, some adventurous pilots, actually the previous 303K record of the site from 2-3 years back. The guy was at 3 o'clock on this place here on the front little point. This is the 300K point. So imagine being at 3 o'clock there when already I'm struggling another whatever 30K low further on, and I'm 3 o'clock at Tot. So now let's make one of the last drawings. It's going to be an interesting one. So it's all about strategy on these long flights and also calculations. And sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. It's really important to be flexible. Here, coming back to this transition, so sometimes flying to the front can make sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Like this black line would have made sense this day, right? I didn't do it. And I went for the very traditional line going inside. And here at this point, it became clear that I cannot continue, which would have been discontinuation. So this is the most typical line on a very, very good day in the afternoon. You might have 4,000 meters. At around this area, you might get 4,000 meters. And then this enables you to basically follow deep into the mountain, basically what this blue arrow was doing, right? So this is like when you get the 4,000 meter and you kind of fly high this area. But this time it didn't work, so the flexibility was unfortunately necessary. And so basically I straight see that I have to come out. So that's what you can see here. I come out and I have to fly around this mountain and basically struggle here, right? Normally, this was a kind of a blue day afternoon, if I remember it properly, because what can happen is that the clouds show you a little bit the way. That's kind of nice when it does happen. And what does it mean? It means that you will see cloud streets somewhere along these lines, these green lines in the valley, and it kind of, you can see them when you're already in this area, and when you're deciding on the route, you can kind of already start thinking, will I fly maybe something like this to connect with these cloud streets, so that you basically come above Tot and in this area with high enough altitude, right? So it's very crucial to kind of search for these thermals with altitude. If you come above Tot with 1,800 meters, you don't have enough time to find it. If you come there with 2.5, because you started at 3.5, then you have much bigger margins. So basically kind of flying the front line, and these areas which have really strong sun still, utilize them to get the maximum altitude and maybe eventually connect with the valleys and with these cloud lines here. That's why I said that this area or this flying in Kerio is technical, because it indeed pushes you to fly also flatlands in the afternoon. You need to be very ready and flexible and check for the clouds, because I might be up north and I can already see that basically the whole area, let me delete this, I might see that here are clouds, small or big or both, and obviously everywhere might be clouds. But if I see that this area where you see these green lines has no clouds, it's blue, it's crazy blue, you might smell some danger. And that was the day, this day that I flew, it was exactly the situation. So basically here at the very beginning of this situation, I had to kind of save the flight at least first and get some initial altitude. So there was a struggle here, flying around the mountain, continuing down, trying to get some thermal, knowing that I need to go into the flats, but I don't want to go there too low. So kind of first trying to build some altitude and make a decision what to do, right? So here I was lucky. I did 3,000 meters. I lost the thermal, but I found it further a little bit. And I was flying 3,500, and I decided to actually stick with the mountain line at this case, because there was, like I mentioned, blue sky. So I was also knowing that there's still some sun on some areas. So I will do still one more screenshot here and talk a little bit about this area. So obviously this area is great in the morning and midday until like 2-3 afternoon, but around 2 o'clock this thing is getting to become a bit of a tricky story. So you might have sun on some of these west exposed ridges. I'm now highlighting some of them. Some are very, very tiny. And this one was one where I was just heading. So this very last one, I'm gonna draw the blue cross here. So I'm heading to this one on purpose because I see the sun there, but I didn't find any thermal there. So I missed it. So yeah, I kind of decide to go in through. Okay, good. But might have not been the right case. Maybe I would have been much more efficient taking all this 3,500 altitude and just going and searching in the flats, especially if I see a line of clouds forming along, or line of cloud forming somewhere midway between the ridge, because these flats are so hot. They always create quite some powerful thermals, and they are much better than the cold mountain, because all these east faces, they are cold, right? And they're sometimes pushing this cold air down and ripping the thermal here inside this area, right? So something to always take account for. So here I am kind of deciding for the line in the mountain, and I'm getting good altitude. You see here I'm getting 4,000 meters. 37. That doesn't mean being 4,000 meters, it's still a winner. It can be tricky. So sometimes even as far as I am now, it might be necessary around Cap Soar to switch for the flats. And then especially, it's never sure that you can ridge soar all the way to Iten. So you see I'm getting low again, 2,400. So again, like tricky to get high. As you can see, I'm struggling with the thermal. Didn't really catch anything. Now I'm kind of connecting to the place where you can normally start soaring, right? Normally, but it didn't work. So I'm going out in front again. And I have to really put all effort into this thermal because I knew that if I get really high, I might be able to fly all the way to E10. So I'm now 3.6. And so from this area with 3.6, you might get close to E10, obviously. And that was kind of the end of the flight. So being able to basically top land on this one. But yeah, some flights, especially the windy days, it's much easier. This last 30K on this one, again, thermaling was necessary. And so yeah, in general, in all these files that are there is definitely quite a lot of material to check, analyze. This was the maybe the longest flight, but also not the only one that is interesting. Maybe this 331, 10.5 hours. This was definitely a hard battle. Less distance and much more time in the air. So obviously less average speed. So here you can see this critical area around the 300K north point, just a bit southeast from Montelo. I'm again trying to, like in the last track, trying to get the key altitude here, but I'm not getting it. So I'm kind of forced to fly further till I kind of manage to get high and get to the north. The way back was also very tricky. This is a tricky point of the crossing. You see, I was really low. I was, well, not super really low, but what was it? Was it 2,000 meters? Yeah, so not that bad. It could be worse, but also not super easy. Flying this part, let's see. So this part looked kind of a little bit easier, kind of, because here around Todd, I was at 4,000 meters. And I took a very straight line. And this is actually the good example that I mentioned. So I had a very nice altitude around Todd here, and I flew around along the big mountains, but it was not working. I was just basically dropping, didn't hit a single thermal, and I was forced to come into the flats because the day was dying out. So here around 4 o'clock, fighting and having to choose to go into the flats, coming into the flats very low, which was a mistake. I should have used, obviously, this beautiful altitude around Todd, 4,000 meters, and diverted into the flats around Chesongoch. And I was then forced to do it. And I was very lucky on this occasion that, you know, I saw the clouds. I went to the flats, mid-valley, once again at 1,400 meters above sea level, which was around 400 above ground. I start to thermal around 0 point lift, then eventually getting a half a meter, 1 meter, then catching a 1.5 meter. And here at 2,500, I'm getting a 3 meter, losing it a little bit, searching around, and then getting the real thermal with a 3 meter from 3,000 meters to 4,400, right? So this was a interesting example where the saving into the flats was necessary, and then still it didn't give me the ticket. I kind of felt it's the ticket to get back home, and I should have flown along the flats further, but the cloud line was finishing, so I decided to divert back and basically catch the ridge. You see I'm above it here. Normally on many tracklooks you see people just flying home with their hands in the pockets. In this area, I'm coming here, catching the ridge line at 2,300 at 5:40 in the evening. It's not holding. And then basically I'm forced to go into the valley and try to save, which obviously didn't work, with some super late evening sun patches and landing down under E10 in the main valley. So yeah, some tracklogs are showing how technical the way back is. And yeah, there's plenty. There's like 5 or maybe even 6 of these 300K flights. All of them are worth checking it because they all have a little bit of a different story. And when you go through these critical points, you understand the battle. So this was a very strong day with strong drifts. It was a 310K turning around, and here I tried to cross this most technical crossing around Sigor. It didn't work. I come back, thermal up, super strong drift into the mountain that I knew it makes no sense to fly the front line. I go deeper into the mountain, get altitude, and cross into the lee side here. Get some altitude in the lee side. Very tricky to pass. I was barely basically standing on place, just trying to cross on full speed bar this little mountain pass, and basically managing to get inside. But this was a very, very strong wind day. And then usually the strong wind days are making it a bit easier to come back. Not always, but sometimes. And this was, I think, the case on this flight. Again, 4,000 meters, 4,000 meter plus on the way back. And you see I'm flying the inside line above these mountains. It looks like super easy. And then connecting with the ridge and soaring all the way home, right? So the stronger the wind you're getting, the harder it is to get from Sigor back up to the front ridge. And then the easier it is to get the last 30K done. And eventually the mornings can be a bit more rough because the wind can play a role there. But yeah, there is always a couple of tricky points to think about. And yeah, to mitigate on the way.
Thank you. Very interesting. Was there ever a day, were there any days when you didn't make it back? Or you had to
I
turn
did.
around?
Yeah, I had one day. Yeah. I had one day, and that was the reason why I was much more than cautious, because the way back on the motorbike is always a bit tricky and not so beautiful.
Yes, no, I get it. Well, maybe next time we'll have a Land Rover waiting for you right at the top so that you can push it a bit further. And if it doesn't work, you can come back in comfort.
Yeah, sure. If it's gonna be like that, I'm gonna push for the 365 for sure.
Yeah, we must
It's
hope.
possible. 365 is sure possible.
Wow.
Will you do you think if you use another wing or other equipment, you will be have an advantage, or you think you'll
Yeah,
come
sure,
back?
sure. I mean, the higher the class wing, the better performance headwind you will have, like that's no doubt. I'm flying a C wing from Phi, and that's till this year, because this year we'll release a D wing, but it's the highest wing in the range. It's a very high quality and high performance glider in the class, so it does fly well, but you cannot compare it with a CCC wing. That will definitely give you, like you can make simple calculations, right? So between the highest end wing and this wing, there's going to be at least 10% performance difference, and much more eventually, because I'm flying a very small size. So if I had I'm 69 kg naked, so if I had another 20 kg body weight, being an 85 kilogram pilot, 89 kilogram pilot. So I would be flying already on the same wing, same wing, 2-3 sizes bigger wing. I'll be flying already around 5 to 8% performance difference. But let's keep it simple. Let's say just like taking the highest class wing, you get 10% increase, which will probably be 20, but let's say 10%. Then, yeah, it's a simple math, 330K, 340K, 10% is 34K. So, 370 is definitely possible. Then I don't think that I hit like the very best day on the days that I flew the 340. It was a very good day, but it wasn't the very best day. I had, I think, better days. On the very beginning, when I took off late, I might have had a better day. Yeah, and yeah, so sure, the place has a potential to fly 370, maybe 380. Yeah, possible on a very good day, I think it's possible. I think that place could do 400K on the high-end CCC wing with a very high risk-taking pilot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, going down south to because for doing the out and return FAI record, you cannot do it from E10, unfortunately, because the out and return, you kind of out and return. And we're not out and return on these triangles. It's a flat triangle. We have to fly south and then go north, and then we cross the triangle. So it's like it doesn't change much on the flight itself. But out and return for the FAI record, which is the category to kind of make the record there, we would have to do like what the tandem records were doing. You need to go to Nayaru. You need to start from there, and you need to fly the same route. And for that, you actually need a windy day, because you need a day which is when the ridge is working. And as you could see on a couple of these track logs, on many of the days when I did 300K, the ridge was not working anymore. So you need a windy day. And then it's also kind of like ideally with a little bit of a south component at the very beginning, that you are being pushed and you fly really fast towards E10. But like from E10, then more north, you are kind of a bit too early there eventually for flying really fast towards top, So yeah, but it's definitely going to be possible to make 350 from Nayaru. I'm pretty convinced about that. Pretty sure now the very current record, which was just set last year in Iquique in Chile, is 350, exactly 350 out and return. So I'm pretty sure that Kenya will be able to deliver the new world record out and return. I'm very convinced about it. As much as Chile can deliver another bigger flight as well eventually there. And yeah, it's just about to go and fly. But I'm not flying for the numbers. So for me, it was more of a challenge to see. That's why I was so conservative, because for me the comfort of the return was the key. And yeah, if I was going just for the bigger number, I would have obviously been able on any of these flights to just say, okay, I'm going to turn around at 2:00, not at 1, right? And that's like 1 hour flying at a 35 average speed is 35K more. Simple mathematics, it gives you basically 370, right? So, 370 is sure possible. On a day when I did once the 330, I think, the French pilot turned around 1 hour after me and he flew all the way back. So imagine. On that day, for example. He was lucky that the day back was working really well. It's just about luck, to have the luck on the way back. So it's kind of like you play cards, you're kind of playing a bit poker. You play cards and you say, okay, boom, I fly till 2, I turn at 2, and then let's see what's going to come out, and then, you have some cards in your hand, you fly fast, you fly efficiently, and then it all works out. And then, yeah, you can play the bingo. But it's, yeah, like I say, it's, if you really hunt for records, then in my case, I would need to come with equipment, the highest performance equipment. You need to optimize on every single level, fly with ballast, fly a big size glider. Like it makes no sense to fly a XS or S size glider, like my glider is 18 square meters projected. So, or 18.5, whatever. But, it's like, flying a big glider, it's a giant difference. So yeah, if you want to go for big numbers, you need to optimize on all these things, because it makes no sense to, you know, come with a small size glider if you really go for the sound.
Andrej, can I ask a quick question? Thank you for going through that flight. It's very technical. But I was wondering if you could explain just how the wind sometimes changes. I don't really quite understand how the wind changes, you know, from, you know, having a southerly component to, you know, until the afternoon, and then suddenly the northerly component. What happens there with the dynamics, the fluid dynamics in the valley, that changes it from south to north after you know 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah, so you have to think, and this is going to be working in, it's going to be working anywhere in the world, right? It's not that it's something specific to just Kenya, but you have to think that you've got some thermal activity, and so at night you have got no sun, and you've got what you would say, what you would officially call a katabatic flow. So you're basically having cold air, which is flowing down the mountains, right? So you see the map here, right? Can
Yeah.
you see the map?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I can see the map. Yeah. Thanks.
yeah. So in the night, all this cold air is flowing down the mountains, right? So what does it mean? So you see all the mountains. So this is a mountain, this is a mountain, all these are mountains, right? So and you will have it anywhere. You will have cold air coming down here. You will have from Nakuru, you will have always cold air coming down here. It's going to be going to the flats. It's going to be going to the flats everywhere, right? So
Okay.
yeah. So and then when the heating starts, it takes some time. So maybe around 10 o'clock, you might have maybe 0, if you would simplify it. And then around 1 o'clock, you start to have the air flowing the other way down. All right. So you will have what you call sea breeze. There's somewhere the sea on the right. You're going to have all this coming from the flats to the mountains. And yeah, then you've got obviously the area we were talking about. So you will have these areas where the air can go between mountains. So you have obviously one mountain here and one mountain here. So the air can go between them and go down, around, and some will flow over it, obviously. Then here, obviously, you might have this flow of air. I never flew there. I never checked it. So, but you know, it can be. You need to just check where is the high and where is the low. You know, so you just check how high is this part of the valley and how high is this part of the valley, and you will straight know that at night it's going to be flowing this direction, and during the day it's going to be flowing this direction. And then you have like a typical flow of air that is defined in this whole direction, we could call meteorological wind. And that's something that you can study and you can see it on the forecast. Some days we'll have forecasted wind like this. Some days we'll have forecasted wind like that. And then it could be that some days, you know, there's going to be, or some seasons will have more like this flow of air. It can all happen. But you have to think that the mixing, you know, you might have like these red arrows in the high altitude, and then you have maybe mid altitude, you have this wind, and then in the valley floor, you might have this wind, right? So it's going to be mixing and it's going to be shaping. So, you know, when you start to thermal, you might be thermaling like this, and then you might start to move this direction, right? So it's all changing throughout the time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So it's just to think that it's always going to go from the higher pressure to the lower pressure. And so, yeah, And lower pressure, the higher you go, you have lower pressure. So at 3,000 meters, it's 700 hectopascals, and at sea level, it's 10,024 hectopascals. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So this switch will be always happening, right? So at 10 o'clock, when you fly from A10 to the north, after 10, between 10 and 11, it's going to intensify more and more and more. And after 11, it's going to be even stronger. So very often, if you come too late from the south to the north, you will just have a harder trouble to transition towards this Cap Soir area. So guys, if you have still a question, think about it, because I have last 5 minutes, or not even. I'm 1 hour late.
Yeah, man,
Maybe
thanks. But thank you, Andrej, for this very technical description. Very nice. I hope you can make it back to Kenya next year. Are you planning that, or?
I don't know yet, like with the current war, you don't know what's gonna be tomorrow, right? So I already booked my flights to Brazil because I'm expecting that this war will go on for a couple months longer. I don't see an exit strategy as much as I want this to be over. I don't see it, and I think the fuel prices might skyrocket. I think there's like a little bit of a global agenda, reorganizing of the world order in general, and quite a lot of political shuffling in the background between kind of like empires, so to say. So it's really hard to understand what's going to be going on, but it could very much mean that there's going to be fuel shortages for many parts of the world, if not all of them. It could mean even restrictions governmental wise. I mean, that would happen in COVID, when people are not allowed to go out. I can imagine that far it can go if the situation doesn't get solved. I mean, we're just basically losing 10 million barrels of oil a day, you want it or not, into the supply. So we can manage maybe a couple of weeks as we did till now, and we can manage maybe another 2-3 months till we're really gonna hit the level that the reserves are going to be kind of tapped in. And yeah, I mean, of course, less supply and higher price will mean less demand. It will all solve itself, but yeah, it's hard to say when this is going to stop. It could be still a couple months going. It could be that I would kind of estimate like October, yes, that is going to reset back into normal, kind of like a straight reopening, maybe August, September. Yeah, so it's really hard to plan for January, but yeah, I did get my flights to Brazil because I expect the flights to maybe even double.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, let's see what's gonna be, and it will be nice to come. It will be nice to do like 3-4 weeks again.
Well, we'd love to see you again, and thank you very much for finding the time to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
man.
guys. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy.
You too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.